All right, thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here. So, as the flyer says, we're going to talk about profiting from your new product idea, and I'll give an overview of paths to profit. And I'm going to start off, of course, with the obligatory legal disclaimer. I don't have to go over too much of that here because in the full program I get into a lot more details of legal things, but I'll touch on some legal things. Anything that I say that sounds like legal advice isn't legal advice. I'm not an attorney. But one of the things I do want to make clear for you, which you could use not only here but any venue that you happen to be in, is to never disclose anything that's secret about your new product idea unless you have a non-disclosure agreement. So we're going to have a 30-minute or so question and answer session at the end here. I'll probably do about a 30-minute presentation. So in any of your questions, don't reveal anything. And the reason for that is there's a thing in patent law called the 1-year rule, where if you disclose anything, make anything public about your patentable material, then you have to file for a patent within 1 year of that disclosure. So there have been many innovators and inventors that have inadvertently made a public disclosure and then lost all rights to the patent. So that's a legal disclaimer. So we'll skip that here. So basically, paths to profits is really new product development. And new product development is a complete process for bringing a product to market. So it starts from conception all the way to profitability, hopefully. And it's really the first stage in creating and commercializing a product. So new product development is an overall strategic process called product lifecycle management. And the reason this is necessary is that in spite of how much you may love your baby eventually will grow up, and I'm sorry to say it's going to grow old and eventually die. Almost every product dies. Maybe the only exception to that might be gelatin, baking soda, air, water. Taxes, yeah. So, but just about every other product eventually will die. And people that study these things have identified that products generally go through this product life cycle. It starts with introduction. In introduction, usually your customers are going to be consumer innovators, early adopters, and then hopefully that if the product continues to grow, you'll get the early majority, and then into maturity, you're going to get the late majority, and then ultimately you're going to have this decline that we speak of, and that's where you're still going to have a few sales. They're going to be the laggards, also known as the late adopters. And just to give you an idea of what I'm saying is true, raise your hand if you have a wristwatch. So there's a few laggards, but the wristwatch is dying. And 10 or 15 years ago, nobody would have ever predicted that. Back in the day, nobody would have predicted that pagers would die. It would have been hard to predict that Blockbuster, that Borders would go bankrupt because there's not a market for books. So even products that we think are going to be here forever, eventually those products are going to die, and they usually die very suddenly without much warning unless you're really looking for it, usually because of some disruptive technology that comes in. So the key takeaway here is that every company has to have some kind of a product development strategy. You cannot put all of your efforts in once you've developed one product to the manufacturing and distribution of that product. You still have to have some reserve resources that are going into ongoing new product development. So if you look at this trend that happens is that you have your product that's going through its maturity cycle, and you have to have other products that are in the pipeline that are going to start coming in and filling in the loss that you're going to have. And the key to that is that you want to have a sustainable business. And so you need new product development not only to create, but to maintain sales and then hopefully to grow sales and to grow market share. So one of the mistakes that people make, especially innovators that are just starting a new company, is they have the idea that they have this brilliant new $1 million idea, this new product that they've developed, and that they're going to build a company in order to bring that product to market. Well, that's starting off really with a misconception about the relationship between a product and a company. The purpose of a company is not to serve the product. the purpose of the product is to serve the company. So if you build a company with the idea that that's going to serve the product, then the company will serve the product, and then you may not have any other products in the pipeline. And when that product stops serving the company, then the company will die. So you want to make sure that you don't get that whole causality inverted. New product development is really the adaptive process of business. So if you look at it and compare it to an organic model, organisms have to adapt to survive. Companies have to adapt to survive. How do they adapt? They adapt by new product development. So the success is going to go, survival is going to go to the most adaptable, and it's necessary to have new product development to do that. And so ultimately, the more products that you have, the longer the life of your company will be. So I give one last example. Who would have thought that Kodak would be gone today? Yeah, that's the most amazing one to me. So new product development, where does it fit in the overall business model? New product development is the first of 4 key business functions. And we usually hear a lot about the operations function, the marketing function, and the finance function, but you must have a new product development function in every business, not only at the beginning, obviously, but on an ongoing one. So if you look at the role of new product development, it's also often referred to as the invention, innovation, the R&D part of the company, and it's really there to create solutions to problems that your customers have, and if you solve their problems, then they're going to solve your problem of growing your market share. So if you look at statistics on how much resources are put into the new product development function in companies, especially larger corporations, typically it's going to be 3.5% to 7% of their gross revenue is going to go into new product development function. For high-tech companies, it's 15% or more. So I've seen companies that spend 50% of their revenue on new product development. So you have to kind of figure out where you are. But one thing that you can be sure of is that if you're below 3.5% of your time and money that's going into new product development after you've been established, then you have a potential problem looming on the horizon. So you need to take a look at that and adjust it. So one of the characteristics of new product development that confuses people is that new product development needs to be cross-functional. So even though I've kind of segmented it out and made it look like it's a separate function from these other business functions, it really cannot be separate in practice. It has to be cross-functional, it has to be multidisciplined in order to have successful product launches. And one of the problems that you've probably heard of is over the transom syndrome, where you have an R&D department or a new product development department. They go away secretly, they come up with a new product, and then they never talk to marketing, they never talk to manufacturing. When it's all done and they have this beautiful new baby, they just throw it over the transom and say, all right, now it's your problem manufacturing, now it's your problem marketing. And that seldom works. Usually what happens is that you get a product that's not manufacturable or maybe a product that's not marketable. And oftentimes it would just take a few tweaks, and it would have just taken a little bit of communication with these other functions in the business to be able to make that product much more successful. So it's got to be cross-functional with not only operations and production, with the distribution. It has to be there has to be involvement on your team of finance, so you have to be looking at the financial feasibility. And nowadays, even more importantly than ever, there has to be somebody in there that's looking at regulatory compliance. So I'd say that probably just about at least a couple of times a month, maybe once a week, I get clients that come in and they've been really hammered by some regulatory compliance issue that they weren't aware of or didn't anticipate. And if you look at just federal law alone, I went to the law library and counted it. There's over 500,000 pages of federal law if you look at U.S. Code and Code of Federal Regulations. Well, nobody can know all of that law. So you have to make sure that you have experts that are helping you to identify what regulatory compliance issues you have. And it could be as simple as a label. There's a whole 150-page book that defines what logos you have to put on clothing to identify how it's to be cared for. So I had a client that was ready to send out an insurance brochure, and then somebody said, well, you better have to send that to the Oregon Department of Insurance. And so he sent it out there, and he'd already had a pallet of these printed up, and it turned out that there was something on there that was supposed to be 12-point text, and he had 9-point text. And they said, well, you'd have been fined $1,000 for every one of these that you'd mailed out. So just very simple things like that you have to be aware of up front. So what comes out of the new product development process? Well, there are certain deliverables that you would expect to come out. And obviously you have to come out with a new product design. But it's really a lot more that you've got to come out with. You have to have a new product, a production system that's capable of making that. You have to come out in the case of, say that you have a product that's injection molded. Well, you have to have the tooling that's going to do that. And you cannot just design the product in a vacuum and then design the tooling later, because it might not be moldable if it's an injection molded thing. And so you have to have design done there. You have to come out with a marketing system. You have to give something to the marketing department to help them best identify the market and get it out to the market, to the people that have that problem. And then you have to pick a business model. You have to have a business plan and sourcing for the components of the product. Now, so that's going to go into the operations. So then, once it gets into the operations, the responsibility of operations is basically to duplicate. And operations is also known as production, manufacturing, reproduction, replication. There are different terms for different industries. In CDs, it would be pressing, and agriculture, it's growing. It could be mining, drilling, performing, and service businesses. But whatever it is, that's the role of operations, is just to duplicate the solution that you've come up with in new product development. And so I worked for Raychem Corporation, which is a Fortune 500 company, and one of the ongoing problems that we had in that was the failure to quarantine new product development from operations. And one of the things that you don't want to do is that, but there's a great tendency to happen, is that people in operations, people in every department really want to be able to exercise their creativity. And even though you want to be able to capture their creativity and you want to set up systems to do that, you do not want them to be exercising their creativity on the manufacturing floor. Because one of the things that customers want is repeatability and predictability. They don't want a product that's going to act one way one day and the next day the other day. Even if the second day is a better way, that's still not going to be good, because it might not fit into the way they're doing things. So you want predictability. And one of the problems that Fortune 500 companies often have is you have creative people in operations, and they want to tweak the product while it's in operations. And so now every batch of product that goes out is different from the previous batch, and it's impossible to debug problems to make sure that you have consistent performance. And then the third function is marketing. So that's also known as distribution. Marketing, basically the role of marketing is to get the solution to the problem. So if you look at the 4 P's of marketing, it's product, price, promotion, and place. Place means that you're getting it to the place where the problem is. You're getting it into the problem space. So that's the role of marketing. So if we look at the process for new product development, I've kind of outlined it here in a schematic form, and I would point out that even though I've shown it as a somewhat linear process, it is not at all linear. So every one of these processes, you're going to get to one of these steps and you're going to be looping back. You're going to get here and loop back, here and loop back. You might go clear back to here. So, but I just have to, in order to talk about it, lay it out in a somewhat linear form. So what I'm going to do is to go down and talk a little bit about each one of those steps in the new product development process. And I'm going to identify probably one of the most common mistakes for each one of those processes. So we're going to start off with the creation process. So I would say that the biggest mistake that people make in the creation area of new product development is having too few ideas. And this can be a really fatal mistake for a couple of reasons. One is it can soak up all of your resources, and maybe it's not the most viable product. And if you don't have a lot of new ideas that you can compare and contrast with and evaluate so you can pick out the best one, well, you may not have been working on the best one because maybe you hadn't thought of it yet. So maybe you better go back and think about some. So every new product developer or new product development department should have a list of at least several hundred new product ideas that they're considering. I have a personal list of 800 ideas. It's just a question of finding time to address any of them. But the fact of the matter is that I used to be on the board of the Inventors Alliance in the San Francisco Bay Area. And we had a couple of inventors in there that were really tragic stories because they had come up with a new $1 million idea, and they latched onto it, and they'd worked on it for maybe tens of years, probably more than 10 years, mortgaged their house, to get tooling and whatnot. And why? But they were in both cases they were non-viable ideas. Why did they cling to those ideas so tenaciously? Because they didn't have any other ideas. And they're afraid that if they couldn't bring that idea to market, that was their last chance for fame and fortune. And if they couldn't bring it to market, then they would be a failure. And if you have a whole list of ideas, you're not going to be attached to one idea, and you're going to more readily eject that idea when it becomes apparent that it's not a viable idea. And then you can move on to the next successful $1 million idea. So statistically, if you look at industry in general, 80% of ideas that companies come up with are abandoned before they even become projects, and only 2% ever get to market. And that's kind of a generous figure. I've read a number of studies on innovation, and there's an outfit called the Innovation Institute that estimates that corporate ideas are anywhere from 1 in 50 to 1 in 500 become products. And for independent inventors, it's from 1 in 100 to 1 in 1,000 ideas ever become products. And so what I like to tell people is when you come up with this $1 million idea, you haven't won the lottery. You've won one lottery ticket. And so anybody tell me, what does it take to win the lottery? A lot of two things, a lot of lottery tickets and a lot of luck. Well, I can't help you with the luck part of it, although if you believe that luck is 50% preparation, maybe we can help you with that. But you really have to have a lot of lottery tickets because it is a numbers game. So then the question is, well, how do you come up with these ideas? So I've studied this quite a bit, and we used to study this at Raychem quite a bit. Had a lot of discussion on systematic approaches to coming up with new ideas so we could generate a lot economically. And basically it comes down to this. If you look at the definition, the marketing definition of a product, it's a bundle of features designed to benefit a particular market segment or group of buyers. And so that kind of implies that there's really two strategic approaches that you can use to come up with new product ideas. So you can either come up with ideas starting from the feature side and then look at what benefits you can serve, or you can start up from the benefits side and look at what features are needed. And so there's a name for this. So this is called technology push. So that's where you come up with technology and then you push it out to the market and see what problems it solves. And the other side of the equation is called market pull, where you find out what the market wants and then you invent to solve their problems. And both of these are valid, and both of these have lots of tactics that you can use. And so later on I'll be talking about the new product development program that I run over at the SBDC downtown. And we have a whole 3-hour class just on these tactics for both strategies to help you figure out, well, which one is best for you. Some people gravitate to one. Typically, scientists and engineers gravitate to this one, but not necessarily. A lot of times marketing people gravitate to this one. People that are in sales go out and they hear all kinds of requests from their customers about problems that need to be solved. They take that back and then they invent to solve that problem. So it's important for you to have in your tool bag all of those tactics.
So Frank, couldn't you argue that the market pull would be less resource just because you already know that if you come up with a widget that solves those, that you know that you've got at least some people who want to buy it?
Usually the market pull is lower risk but lower opportunity, because if you only go by what the market wants, there's a lot of things that if you think about them, the market would have never said that they wanted them. And this is one of the things that somebody once asked Jobs. I don't remember the exact quote, but they asked him why he doesn't do more market research, and he said, and why he doesn't ask the market what they want. And he said, well, the market doesn't know what they want. That's my job. And so if you look at things like VCRs, DVD players, a lot of the high technology products that we have out there, if you'd gone out and surveyed the market, you would have never come up with those. So those are the types of things that really it's technology push. But with technology push, conversely, you come up with a lot of things that the market doesn't want and never will want. So it's the market pull is lower risk, but potentially lower opportunity. Technology push is a lot higher risk, but that's where you get some of the disruptive technologies. So then, now suppose that you do follow what I'm advocating and come up with hundreds or thousands of ideas. You obviously can't implement all of those ideas. So most of us don't have the resources to pursue even more than one idea at a time. So you need some kind of a method to systematically go through those, compare them, figure out which one you're going to put your resources into. And so that's the next 3-hour class that I do is on evaluating your ideas. And so I look at systematic methods that you can go through and take your ideas, prioritize them, figure out which one you're going to work on. It's not a guarantee that that will be the hit, but at least it will minimize your risk and maximize your opportunity. And so I like Thomas Edison's quote. He says that anything that won't sell, I don't want to invent. Its sale is proof of utility, and utility is success. Now that's kind of sounds like it's coming from the side of market pull, although he was really a technology push guy mostly. And then another of my favorite is $1 million ideas are a dime a dozen. The determination to see an idea through is what's priceless. And that is by this guy named Robert Diefenbach, which I've been unable to find who he is or what he does, but that's definitely his quote. So now we get to the whole profit part. So back to this one. So one of the common mistakes that people make in this area is irrational exuberance. And so I mentioned that with the example from the Bay Area. It's people that they really have no rational reason to be enthusiastic about a product, and so they just go ahead with it without doing any due diligence. And that's a really big mistake, because usually most of us only have enough resources to take a flyer on 3 or 4 or 5 products at the most like that. And then,
So, as somebody who does try to create products that are novel and that the market doesn't really want yet, you have to defend that to other people, potential investors, potential co-workers, and so then you have to defend yourself against that notion of being exuberant about something nobody wants, right? So there's that trade-off. It's like, I know people will want this because of X. People say there's no desire for that, or else it would already exist.
right. So the key word in there is irrational exuberance. I'm not opposed to exuberance. You need to be very exuberant, but it's got to be rational, and you should be able to defend that. There's ways you can do that, and that's one of the things that I do in the marketing research class is go out there and find out, what can you educate people. A lot of times people have a need, but they can't be educated. And there's a lot of examples, like when Bell came up with the telephone. He thought, well, banks would be a good market for this, and so he went into some banks and tried to sell his telephone, and they literally escorted him out, and they said, get that toy out of here. They didn't want to have anything to do with it. And so now that doesn't mean that you give up, but that means you have to be able to maybe take a longer view, and you have to make sure you have the resources to be able to withstand that long introduction cycle. So now another mistake people make is failure to consider possible paths to profits. And so I've identified, I think this is comprehensive. If anybody thinks of another one, then let me know. But I think there's only really 5 ways that you can profit from an idea. One is to publish it, and this could apply not just to literary works, but it could apply to inventions. So there's architects that design houses, and then instead of building the house, they publish a book of plans. And I knew a guy that came up with a way to make an inexpensive vacuum forming machine. And instead of making those machines and selling them, he wrote a book on it and sold it at Tap Plastics and made pretty good money just selling the book on his idea. Selling your idea outright, so that's obvious. If you have a good idea and you can get somebody else that can put it to use to commercialize it, then you might consider doing that. The problem with selling is that you only get one lump sum, and so I like the idea of renting so that you can get carpal tunnel endorsing the backs of checks. Of course, we don't use checks anymore, but you can use it. That's especially applicable if you have a manufacturing process. You can keep that process a secret and then use that process to have a competitive advantage over other people making that same product. And then finally, you can manufacture it. So we're in a little later, we'll look in more detail at each of these because there's further decisions to be made. So then the next thing that you want to look at that a lot of people make a mistake in is giving away equity too soon. And how many of you watch Shark Tank? Raise your hand if you watch Shark Tank. So a lot of times the sharks are very candid, and they tell the people on there that you're giving away too much equity or you're giving away equity too soon. And this is a big mistake. And one of the reasons for this is because equity, everybody knows about equity and Shark Tank and whatnot, and we all know about debt. But there's other financing methods that people really that the average developer might not know about. And those other two are assets and grants. And one of the things I can tell you from participating in the Willamette Angel Conference is that we look very favorably on potential investees that have utilized the grant aspect of funding and that have been able to get a lot of innovation grants because they're non-dilutive. So they don't cut into our share of the ownership. And plus it shows a certain amount of innovation, and it shows a certain amount of validity that people that know about the industry have recognized, well, this has something to it, so we're going to go ahead and give money for social benefit to promote that. But the other thing that people don't know about is assets. So a lot of times you can sell future assets. So raise your hand if you have ever heard of factoring. Wow, more than usual. Okay, raise your hand if you've ever heard of MCAs, merchant cash advances. Ah, so these are 2 ways. Factoring is a way that you can actually convert your receivables into instant cash, and it doesn't go on your balance sheet. It's not a debt. Merchant cash advances is a way that you can convert future sales that haven't even happened yet, that you don't even have orders for, into cash today. And again, it's an advance that doesn't go on your balance sheet. So these are some of the things that I like to encourage people to look at so that they can avoid equity at all costs and hopefully even avoid debt. Now the next thing that I want to look at is protecting your creation. So your work is very valuable and it needs protection. So I do a 3-hour class and I divide it in 2. Half of it is on intellectual property in general, because I found that a lot of people, even though they're creating intellectual property, they don't even know what intellectual property is, they don't know what the term is, and therefore they don't know all of the variations. And a lot of companies have very valuable intellectual property and they don't even realize it. And they don't even know that they really need to protect it. And just to give you an idea, Coca-Cola, the brand name, can anybody guess at what that's worth? Take a guess.
$5 billion.
Higher. Not higher than $1 trillion, though. The wise guy here. Huh? 35 billion. Okay, so here's something that's completely intangible. You can't touch it. It's worth, maybe it's arguably worth as much as the company is worth. So So that's something I try to help people understand, all of the different types of intellectual property and all of the different protections that go along. And keep in mind, another thing I like to help people understand is that there are more ways of protecting than just legal ways. So then one of those types of intellectual property is names. And so a mistake that people often make in the name area is that they fail to distinguish between a trademark and a trade name. So if you think that you know the difference between a trademark and a trade name, raise your hand. Okay, so somebody almost tentatively. So that's a very important difference. And if you don't recognize that difference and you go get a trade name and you think that that's going to protect your brand, then you could find out that you could register a trade name and be completely successful in that process. And then you could start using that trade name as a trademark. And the first thing that would happen is you get a cease and desist with a lawyer letterhead on it, and then you're not being allowed to use that even though you registered it with the state. So I've had a couple of clients that really got into that trap, and they had to completely retool their branding because of that. So that's something that I go over and try to help people understand that so they don't fall into that trap. Now there's another type of intellectual property. Pardon?
Can you give us an illustration like
Yeah.
between trade? I mean,
Sure.
trade
So I could.
trade name
Yeah.
purposes.
Yeah. So tomorrow or today is I could still today in 15 minutes I could go log on to the Secretary of State in Oregon, and I believe that I could register a company called Apple Company, and I would not have any problem doing that. Okay, now I can go and open up a store. Could I say Apple Company on my store? No, I could not, because Apple is a brand as well as being a trade name. Apple is also a brand name, and just because I register as a trade name does not give me the right to use it as a brand name to identify my goods and services. That makes sense? So if anything that you need more detail on here, I do free advising at the SBDC. So you can come and talk to me about that, or you can get into this program and I can help you with specifics. So now the next area that people make mistakes in is patents. So amazingly, the common mistake that people make in patents is getting a patent. So why is that a mistake? Well, the statistics really tell it all. So if you look at all the patents filed, 50% of the patents are never granted. And it can cost anywhere from $3,000 for filing fees to $15,000 or more, depending on the attorneys that you have involved. And guess what? If you don't get an issued patent, you don't get any of that money back. And then the ones that do issue, only 3% ever make enough money to pay for the patent. So when you do the math, that means that basically 1.5% of patents filed for are profitable. So basically that by definition I would say is a mistake. All these people, the other 8.5%, those were all mistaken patents. So that's one of the biggest mistakes you can make. And so in my 3-hour patent class, I try to give enough information. I'm not an attorney, and I don't tell you how to write your own patent. That's way beyond the scope of anything we could do. But hopefully I give you enough understanding of what a patent is and what requirements you have to make it pretty likely that you're going to be able to get the patent, and how to decide, even if you can get the patent, whether it makes sense economically to get the patent and the benefit that it gives you. One of the benefits that the patent gives you is the right to sue somebody. There's no patent police. So if somebody infringes, you have to sue them. And guess how much it costs to litigate patent infringement lawsuit through trial? Any guesses? Very close, $5 million through trial. And depending on the infringement, you may not get attorney fees back. Yeah.
However, could it be worth getting patents if you're hoping to sell your company?
Oh yeah, patents. I'm not opposed to patents. I'm opposed to foolish patents. So patents can be very valuable. In fact, they can really be the essence of your company. So that's what you have to understand, and that's what I try to help you do. So then, now another mistake that people make is manufacturing their product. So you might say, well, how could this be a mistake? Well, because a lot of times there's a better solution, and that's either assigning the product to somebody else that has existing manufacturing capability, or licensing it to somebody and just getting revenue. So if I invent, like I have a friend that invented a little thing that punches business cards so you could put it in a Rolodex. Raise your hand if you know what a Rolodex is. and so that was something he could easily manufacture himself. But even that had, $30,000 of tooling. So even that's quite an investment. But if I invented a vacuum cleaner, I would be crazy to build a vacuum cleaner factory. That would be something I would license. And so really whether you succeed or fail in monetizing an idea, really a lot of, to a very large extent, depends on this particular decision, whether you manufacture or whether you license. And so I can try to help you with that. And then even if you decide to manufacture, one mistake that people make is underutilizing what we call contract manufacturing. So does any, again, raise your hand if you know what contract manufacturing is. So if, about half of you know that. So for those that don't, contract manufacturing is where you don't license it, you still control it. And so you're still technically the manufacturer, but you either have somebody else with existing capacity manufacture the whole thing for you or manufacture part of that for you. And the whole decision comes into a spectrum of solutions here, ranging from private label to vertical integration. And so in vertical integration, you own everything to the earth. And to give you an example of vertical integration, the textbook case that you probably might read about in B school would be Henry Ford in the early days. He owned the forests and the sawmills to make the wooden spokes and the wheels. He owned the rubber plantations and the rubber mills to make the rubber on the tires. He owned the mines and the minery, or the miners and the refineries to make the steel, to make the parts on the car. And then, of course, he owned the car manufacturing. So he was totally vertically integrated in the manufacturing direction. And we'll have a slide later to talk about the distribution direction, but you can also be vertically integrated there, which he was, because he owned all the distributors and he owned all the dealerships. So he was completely vertically integrated. And of course, the advantage of that is that he had total control. The disadvantage is very, very expensive. And so there's trade-offs to where you want to go on here. On the other extreme of private label, let's suppose you have a salon, a hair salon, and you want to come up with your own hair product. And let's say you don't even have a formulation or even know what a formulation is, but you just know you want product in there with your salon's name on it. Well, there are companies that you can go to that have 100 or 200 formulations in their catalog, and you can say, all right, well, I want a conditioner number 3 there with the special scent in it, and I want it to put in this bottle, like looks like this, and I want my salon's name on it. And they'll say done, and they'll manufacture those for you and ship them to you, and you put them on your shelf. So that's private label. So you can go the whole spectrum of having no ownership over manufacturing to complete ownership. And so that's another area where you really have to understand the options and make informed decisions based on your resources and based on the particular product. So I can help you out with that. And then, so if you decide to go the manufacturing route, if you don't do things correctly, then you're going to have to greatly confine your living space in your home, because the rest of your home's going to be filled with boxes of your product. And if you do things right, you may never have any of the product in your home. So like if you use a fulfillment house, for example. And so you have this whole spectrum. You can have independent, if you're not good at selling, you can have independent agents do the selling for you, and you don't have to pay them unless they perform. You can pay them totally commission basis. You can have fulfillment houses. So a lot of people use Amazon fulfillment. No, raise your hand if you know what a fulfillment house is. Okay, so a few of you don't. So fulfillment house is kind of like outsourcing your warehouse and your shipping and sometimes your order processing. So you would ship a pallet of your instead of having a pallet in your garage and shipping onesie-twosies to your customers, you ship pallets to the fulfillment house. They receive the orders, they process the orders, they pick and pack the orders, they ship the orders to your customer with your label on it. The customer would never know it, and they send a check to you for the profit. So how's that sound? A lot better. So, so there's a whole spectrum of different ways that you can set up your distribution channels in order to minimize your resources, maximize your profit, maximize your sleep at night, minimize your headaches and your migraines. So the common mistake that people make in new product development is the failure to set up distribution channels of marketing intermediaries. I think one of the, we always hear DIY, do it yourself. I say it's DIE. DIY is DIE. One of the most biggest mistakes that people make throughout the new product development process is trying to do everything themselves. And so that happens in manufacturing, happens in distribution, it even happens in the design and development of the product. Generally, the more people you can bring on your team, the more good people you can bring on the team, the more likely you are to succeed if you're judicious in how you compensate them and you don't give all your equity away. So this company, Raychem, that I worked for, Paul Cook founded the company, and it's Sequoia Wire and Cable, and he let over 50% of the company get away from him, and so what happened? They fired him. And so he went and started Raychem Corporation, and he built it up to $1 billion company, and he bought Sequoia Wire and Cable, and then guess what he did?
Fired everybody.
He did. So, so that's basically a mistake that you want to avoid. So how we're doing on time? So we started late, but we're ending late. So basically, this is a summary of the points that I've covered here, and this is a list of basically a syllabus of the program that I do, and I have some flyers. The program's going to start October, the third week in October, and I used to do all of these as separate classes. So I had 10 3-hour classes, and it's $50 a class. And I found that a lot of the people that would take one class took them all, and so to be able to cut them a deal, we got some grants, put it into the form of a program to enable us to do that. And so now you can get all 10 $50 classes for $150. Yeah. And so I try to do it roughly once a month, but I don't want to go into the summer, so one of the months will have 2 classes in it. And but wait, there's more. I don't have any fancy knives or vegetable peelers or anything, but I do have a special deal for you. So how many of you have heard of the Small Business Management Program that we do over at SBDC? So a few of you. Huh?
Gary Smith?
Yeah, Gary Smith. So that program is, so if we go back to the, go back to this thing. So I'm only focusing on this, and of course the multidiscipline aspects of it. So Gary's SBN program focuses on this part of the business, and he doesn't get into this too much. So his first quarter is 5 3-hour classes on marketing principles, and then the next quarter is on finance, and the third quarter is operations. So it's a total of 15 3-hour classes, so it's just 45 hours. And then both of our programs come with up to 20 hours of coaching from the instructor. And so his program, again, he's lowered it over the years through grants and whatnot. And so last year it was $600, and this year he got it down to $499. I don't think he's going to be able to get it any lower than that, so you better not wait. It could go up. But this program, if you get into this program, then I'll give you an extra $50 off on the new product development, because this is a very critical piece, and we really want people to get in on that. But he just couldn't logistically fit it in time-wise to the SBM. But we do want people to get in there, so that's why we give that extra incentive to get into that program.
There's no conflict with the two schedules.
No, they're scheduled, so they work together. So basically that covers that, and then I'll have the flyers here for you that I can give out, and then I also have some catalogs. And then just in the interest of sustainability, if you don't think you need it, don't take it. But if you don't need it, but you know somebody that does, go ahead and take one. And then I'll just turn it over to Q&A now. Yes?
Frank, your comments are always spot on, and for those who've been around, it's like, oh, yeah, been there, done it. Could you take just 2 minutes and a little like self praise, but give some folks some of your background, because I mean,
Oh, sure.
you know of what you speak.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm not going to say when I graduated from Oregon State, although I think you can probably Google it and find it somewhere. But so I'm a BS EE from Oregon State. But before you Duck fans go pile on me, I went to U of O for 2 years to get my pre-engineering. So I majored in physics and philosophy. So I like to tell people that I had both physics and the metaphysics. So I have I'm holistically trained. And so, but U of O, as you may know, doesn't have an engineering program. So I transferred to Oregon State, finished up my engineering in EE there. And so then I worked for Weyerhaeuser for a while, and control systems engineer. And then I went to, I got recruited down to Memrex in California, and I worked there for a while. And then I got recruited to a small software startup company, and so I was the product development manager for a while, and then the operations manager. And basically it was a cloud software company, but back in those days, we called it time sharing. It's really the same thing. And so then I got recruited to Raychem Corporation. I started off there as a control systems engineer, a group leader, Gruppenführer, if you know German. And so I was a group leader, and then I went to, worked up, and I was a department manager, and then I was a section manager, so I had all the engineering, business services under me. And so my responsibility was to manage all the engineers that developed some new product, but a lot of the technology for manufacturing the new product and for taking care of the intellectual property. And so, so I saw a lot of things throughout my career. And then, of course, I've been advising. I started advising as a volunteer at SCORE a few years back. And then I was, SBDC had an opening, and they asked me if I'd come over there and, can you do it for money? I guess. I do it for free, so I guess I can do it for money. Beer money, yeah. And so, so I went over to SBDC, and I've been there for, I think, going on 5 years. And it's part-time gig, and so I do advising, and I do new product development program, and then I assist Gary Smith in his SBM program. So I assist him I do a couple of the sections, like I do a section on intellectual property and SEO, and then I do help him with advising. So, all right. Any other questions?
Yeah, trademarks and trade names.
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay. So a trade name is a name for your business, and a trademark is a name for your product. And a trade name is a business is an entity, a creature of the state. And here it would be the state of Oregon. And a trademark, a product name, is generally a creature of the federal government. So there's a completely different set of rules for each of those. So I gave the example of Apple. Well, how can I register a company called Apple? Well, because it's very easy to satisfy the trade name rules in one state. all you have to do is make sure that that company name is not registered in that state. And generally, companies only register in one state. So I could go up there. It's probably free. But since it's a different set of rules, just because I've satisfied the rules for a trade name, which are very simple in Oregon, that doesn't mean that I've satisfied the rules for trademark. So to satisfy those rules, I would have to go to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, and I would have to see if anybody has registered that name federally. And so there are many, many company names that are registered with the state of Oregon that are not, that are potentially already registered by somebody else in another state as a trademark. And in fact, there can be many companies, there could be technically a company in at least every of the 50 states with the same name. And moreover, in Oregon and a lot of states, you can register your company name for use just in one county if it's an ABN. So you could go assume business name. So you could go and you say, I want to assume business name, I want Lane County, and they could potentially give it to somebody else in a different county. So you can see how there's a completely different purpose, completely different regulatory authority, completely different rules that you have to look at. Does that make sense? Does that clarify the? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And in the digital age, be careful of selling your brand, because as you get URLs and work under a brand, if you've leased it under like Yahoo or someone else, they have part ownership of that name now, and you actually have to buy it back from them, or they have a whole different set of agreements.
Wow, boy. Okay, any other questions? Wow. That's good because I did a thorough job, or bad because nobody's interested. But if you come up with questions, later, oh, okay.
What do you think of lean startup?
Well, I believe, I'm a strong believer in failing quickly. And so I think that the faster, and that's why I said originally up front that the whole idea of the iterative process, which is really the foundation of lean, is that you don't go and do the whole thing in a big way. You do it in a very simple way, and you do it quickly. And so I'm a strong believer in that. And in fact, I get people in that want to engage in a big marketing research project and to figure out if their product is viable. And a lot of times I tell them, the best way to find out if your product is viable, if it's easily implemented, is to make it and to sell it. And in fact, there's ways that you can do that without even doing it. And you have to be careful. There's some legal issues involved in that. But we used to, when I was in the Bay Area, we did that all the time. So we'd think that we had a product that was viable. That was very common with computer boards. So you'd come up with a computer card for some additional, some peripheral or capability or whatever. And you'd design the card conceptually, and you'd define what the specs of it are, and you'd mock up something in Photoshop, and then you put an ad in Microtimes or EE News or whatever the best publication is, and then you'd see how many people you sell it to. And if you get a lot of orders, then you invent it. And if you don't get any orders, you scrap the project and you give them their money back. But that's the legal issue you have to watch taking money. Yes?
Isn't that a Kickstarter kind of thing?
Kickstarter is very much the same concept. Yeah. It's in the derogatory term for that is called not hardware or software, vaporware.
Yeah.
So very common to do that. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah. You had another one?
Oh, you mentioned a lot of legal issues. Would you advise a new small business to get a lawyer right away, or have to get legal advice from somewhere?
Right. There's some cases where you have to get a lawyer immediately, and that is before you ever get any investment. Now, when I say an investment, I am talking about a passive investment. Founders are exempt from a lot of the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission regulations. So, and here again, It sounds like I'm giving legal advice, but I'm not. Not an attorney. But you should talk to an attorney. So if you have a rich aunt or uncle that's going to put some money into your business, or even a parent or sibling or whatever, before you do that, you have to make sure that they fit into the right exemption and that you follow all the rules that allows you to conform and comply with that exemption. I had a client that, of course, before he came and talked to me, he formed his corporation. He was an inventor and needed some money for product development, and went and he sold stock to friends and family, and he's all ready to go. And then the SEC notified him that he was in violation of the SEC laws, and they fined him $50,000 personally. And by the way, did any of you go to the law thing at the? So you heard the fact that you're personally liable. Being a corporation or an LLC does not protect you from breaking the law.
Yeah.
And so he was personally liable for $50,000. And so he hired an attorney. In fact, I think it was Catherine Moyer that he hired. And so they got the fine down to $4,000 or $5,000. He didn't have to go to jail. But his mistake was, yeah, that was nice. So his mistake was that he didn't hire an attorney before he got a passive investor. So that's one place where it's essential. Even though there's some great books on getting a patent yourself called Patent It Yourself.
Patent for dummies.
Strangely. Patent for Dummies, but I like Patent It Yourself by David Pressman. It's one of my favorites. And David Pressman advocates what is called pro se patents. But I really think that in most cases, especially a technology product, I really think you would be foolish to try to get your own patent. There's just so many moving parts, but that's something I can help you look at and help you make the call on it, whether you should do it. Yeah.
Well, you didn't mention trade secret. Isn't trade secret often a good alternative to a patent?
Yeah, so trade secret is great as long as the secret's not revealed when you have the product. So there's some things like a formula that you can maintain a trade secret. So
Like Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola, when John Pemberton invented Coca-Cola in 1876, he wisely kept it a trade secret. If he had patented it, it would have been public. Back in those days, it would have been a public domain 20 years after the filing. Now it's after the issue, and so then everybody'd be making. I'd have Frank's Coca-Cola, and so he's able to keep that. They've been able to keep that secret all these years. If you have a manufacturing process, Ray Kim had a lot of trade secret manufacturing processes that we would never want to patent because it'd get out, and then people eventually. Yeah.
You mentioned as a process or a foundation, you have lots of ideas, so you don't get trapped or married to one single idea. And even in that kind of method, some ideas tend to bubble to the surface.
Yeah.
Allowing for that, what are your thoughts on brainstorming and have lots of ideas of being second to market with anything? Look at stuff and being the second to market, or focusing your ideas on add-ons to something that already exists big time.
Yeah, I love add-ons. Add-ons is one of the tactics, and see that I don't remember the year, but I think it was John Dewey was the head of the U.S. Patent Office, and he made this proclamation. He said everything that can be invented has been invented, and he proceeded to shut down the U.S. Patent Office. He's defunding the patent. Oh, okay, it's all done. There's nothing new. And the beauty of, and you've all heard all these stories and a lot of hyperbole maybe about technology, like the Moore's Law, things doubling every 18 months, and same thing with information is doubling and at an exponential rate, and new products are coming out all the time. Well, the beauty of that is that every new product that comes out solves a problem, and for every problem it solves, it creates 10 more problems. So you look at things like the cell phone. Okay, well, they drop and break. So now you have cell phone cases, and people don't want to hold it up to the ear because they're going to get brain cancer. It's tennis elbow or whatever. So then Bluetooth comes along. So every product that comes out creates a whole bunch of opportunity for new product. So I love that, and I list that as one of my tactics that I use. You had a question back
Just
there?
anecdotal, partner with my youngest son, he had replicated a lot of popular apps in the App Store, game apps,
Yeah.
and he just changed little things on it. Creatively added on, and just took the bulk of the successful idea and expanded on it.
Right.
And now the kid is generating $500,000 a year just
Wow.
on that.
Well, that's an interesting point in the area of copyright. So in copyright, a copyright cannot protect ideas or concepts. It only protects original creative expression that's fixed in a tangible medium of expression. So you can take, now sometimes you can have patents on software, and that's a whole course actually. But generally, if you take the concept and you recode it and you have your own images and whatnot, then you can do that, and it's not a copyright infringement, and you can put a new twist on it that gives you a unique value proposition, and you can do exactly what he does. It's a very good approach. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you protect a trade secret?
Well, there's a great book out there, and it's very strangely titled Non-Disclosure Agreements, and it's how to make a non-disclosure agreement. And that's the best way to do that. Of course, the best way to protect a trade secret is to not tell anybody, because that basically is one of the basic laws of information theory, is that if it's a secret, then nobody knows it, and then they can't communicate it.
Well, non-disclosure protects you from somebody going out.
So what? Yeah.
Side and
So that's where I say the first line of defense is to don't tell anybody, but sometimes you have to tell people. Like you might have to tell employees, contractors, or whatever. So then, if you do tell somebody, then you bind them to secrecy using a non-disclosure agreement, and then there's provisions in there that you further say that they can't tell anybody, or if they have to tell anybody to do their job, then they have to bind them with the same agreement. Now, there's another approach that I really like that's kind of comes from the military, I guess, which is strategic sourcing. And the beauty of strategic sourcing is that, let's say that you have a gadget that you want to make 5 parts, and you don't, and you want to use contractors, but you don't want any one person to have the whole thing. So you farm out the parts, but you don't tell any of the sources what those parts are going to be used for. And so that's one way that you can make it harder for the secret to get out. And to give you another example back to Coca-Cola, is I don't know that they do this. I believe they probably do, but I've read it somewhere. They order ingredients that are not in Coca-Cola. And they also order ingredients that they request to be shipped in mislabeled containers. So if somebody's up on the grassy knoll with binoculars counting the trucks that are going in so they can figure out the formula Coca-Cola, they will not be able to do it. So that's another way. In the area of software, there's a great thing called obfuscation. Raise your hand if, I bet there's software people, raise your hand if you've heard of obfuscation. So there's actually software that will obfuscate your software for you. And what obfuscation means is that anybody that's familiar with programming, is that like in the source code or interpreted code, there's usually a lot of things that you put in there that makes it easy for the programmer. So I'm a amateur Perl programmer, and so I can't remember from one day to the next why I did something, because Perl is so powerful but also in the same way obscure. And so I put lots of comments in. I put comments at the end. I put comment lines. I make sure that my variable names are very meaningful. So I use a very rational conditional branching to keep things all orderly. I use a lot of maybe subroutines, or I don't do object much, but if I did, I'd use a lot of objects.
Make it really understandable.
Make it really, really understandable. Well, the purpose for keeping it a secret, we're way past time. Okay.
Okay.
So I'll just finish up this question, and then we'll wrap up. So for keeping it secret, you want to do exactly the opposite of everything I've just told you. And so obfuscation software will do that for you. It goes through and it changes all of the variable names. It keeps them consistent, but it changes them to random letters. It gets rid of all the comments, strips all the comments out. It changes the branching around to equivalent but arcane methods of branching and or program flow control. And so it does all these things that are exactly the opposite of what a good programmer will do. And so that makes it harder for anybody that gets the source code to go through and figure out what you're doing. It makes it harder to decompile it. And so that's another way. But I can talk to you more on one-on-one on different ways to keep things secret. So thank you very much for staying over and for all your great questions and your attention. So what I'm going to do before you get up is I'm going to put, anybody that's interested, I'll put the flyers for the new product development. And then if you're interested in the small business management program and our center, I'll put those out here. And then I have a pile of catalogs so you can see what some of the one-on-one class or one-off classes that we do. So I'll put these here, and thank you very much.